Alright, hey guys, how you doing? Back again. I'm going to do a quick little video here. Sorry I didn't do the video like I said I was going to do last Thursday, but I had some family come into town and I want to spend a little time with that. So, quick little update on some of the free agents. Cody Allen signed, relief pitcher. He signed a one-year deal with the Los Angeles Angels. Pretty good deal for his fantasy value because he is already been named the closer by the manager in LA. So that's really good because he's going to get the opportunities for saves. He has a lot of upside. As I said in my last video, a couple of years back, he was one of the top relievers in baseball. So good signing there for fantasy purposes. That'll definitely give him some value moving forward for this year. Redraft leagues, you're going to want to probably take him probably in the 10 to 15 in the reliever range. Keeper leagues, you're not going to use a keeper on him, but he's a guy you want on your team. Dynasty leagues, obviously, you're going to just plug and play him. Actually, right before I got here today, I'm sitting outside the school again. Is where I'm going to do most of my videos, more than likely. As I was getting here, it came across the wire that Asdrubal Cabrera, who was not in my last video as one of the top 50 free agents who hadn't signed yet, but he was right outside the top 50 on most major websites. Major League Baseball Trade Rumors.com, MLBTR.com. They had him listed as an honorable mention right outside the top 50, so he's a solid player. He plays second, short, and third. So he has corner infield eligibility, has middle infield eligibility, and obviously multiple position eligibility. Strong hitter. Typically hits around 270 to 290. He's got 20 home run potential. He's got 70 to 90 RBI potential. So very, very solid guy who you want in your lineup. He signed a one-year deal with the Texas Rangers. They have an opening at third base as Adrian Beltre retired last year. And they traded Jurickson Profar, who was one of their prospects, who was projected to be able to take over the third base spot. They have Joey Gallo, who plays a little bit of third, but at this point in his career, he's more of a backup outfielder / DH type player. Cabrera will be much better defensively and much more consistent with the bat. Gallo has power potential, but virtually no average or on-base percentage potential. So I would much rather have an Asdrubal Cabrera. Now, admittedly biased, I have always been a huge Asdrubal Cabrera fan. Back when he first came up with the Indians, then when he went to Tampa Bay for a little while, and then he became a Met. So he's always been one of my favorite players. I actually wish the Mets would have brought him back on a 1 or 2 year deal. But we signed Jed Lowry, which is it's a great signing. The guy's an all-star. He's one of the top second basemen in baseball. He's a little older than Asdrubal Cabrera. I think he's like 2 years older than Cabrera. But all things being equal, if I took my heart out of it and went with my head, Larry's probably the better player. So, but yeah, good opportunity for Cabrera in Texas to produce, not only with Texas, but if Texas falls out of the playoff race early as they did last year, because he's only on a 1 year deal and he's only getting paid $3.5 million. I do not know if there's any incentives in his contract, but just on a straight $3.5 million deal, he is going to be a huge trade deadline candidate. So if you then can see him get moved to a contender where he'll have greater RBI potential, if he goes to a ballpark that, it's easier for him to hit home runs in. He's a switch hitter. So, let's say he gets traded, to the Yankees. Let's say Gleyber Torres goes down and they need a, second baseman, or Didi Gregorius doesn't come back from his injury the way he did, and, the Yankees don't sign Machado or anything. So now you can move Gleyber Torres over to short and Cabrera could play second. With that short porch and left at Yankee Stadium, and Cabrera's a better hitter from the left side of the plate, you could see him in the second half of the year hit 15 home runs just, alone. So it's going to be an interesting situation to watch. Even if you're not drafting Cabrera to be a starter, he's a great bench stash play, because if he does get traded, depending on where he gets traded, he could win a lot of leagues for you come around your playoff time. So it's definitely a situation you want to keep an eye on as the year goes along. I could see leagues that he might not even get drafted in, and he'll be on your waiver wire. Definitely want to look at him as a stash play, because that is definitely something that could pay huge dividends come the playoffs for you. Yeah, so those were a couple of major free agent signings over the past few days. The free agent market's been really slow this year, and virtually none of the guys that I mentioned in my last video, except for Cody Allen, have signed. So there's been a lot of minor signings, a lot of minor league deals with invitations to spring training, stuff like that. So the big dominoes have still yet to fall. Harper hasn't signed. Machado hasn't signed. Keuchel hasn't signed. Kimbrel hasn't signed. Mike Moustakas still hasn't signed. So we'll definitely be keeping an eye on that. And as they sign, if they all sign within a couple of days of each other, I'll definitely pop another video up, and just to give my analysis of where they're going to be and what kind of fantasy impact it's going to bring for them. So moving on, the main purpose of my video today is going to be more for the advanced players, or for those beginners that are looking to get into some harder leagues, some more competitive leagues, stuff like that. This is gonna deal a lot with draft strategy, and what that's gonna impart is, now is where you're gonna really start wanting to focus on your minor league guys, your prospects. Knowing a lot about these guys, knowing about sleepers, guys who are poised to break out. This is where you're going to really want to pay attention and really focus in on. Because, I mean, it's not hard to have the number 1 overall pick and say, I'm going to take Mike Trout. That's kind of a no-brainer. It's just like in football. If you have the number 1 pick, you're going to take a Todd Gurley. You're going to take, Le'Veon Bell, if he signs somewhere next year. You're going to take an Ezekiel Elliott. For the quarterbacks, the first ones off the board are always going to be Aaron Rodgers, Andrew Luck. Patrick Mahomes now is going to jump into that discussion. And once we do some football videos coming up after baseball gets started, as we get to the NFL draft, I'm going to talk really long and hard about the quarterbacks, because I have some interesting theories about how the industry is going to be changing here within the next couple of years, with the way the league is developing into more of an offensive league and stuff like that. But we'll get into that later. So with redraft leagues, if you're playing in more high stakes redraft leagues, or if you're trying to get into the more competitive ones, knowing your rookies and your sleepers is really, really important, because again, everyone's going to be going for the names. At third base, everyone's going to know your Nolan Arenados. Everyone's going to know, your Machado for this year, because he'll probably have third base eligibility. He may not have it going forward, because depending on where he signs, he may just play shortstop. But for this year, he should have third base eligibility. People are going to know those guys. They're going to know the Josh Donaldson, name, who's in Atlanta now. Stuff like that. So, but knowing where some of your sleepers are, knowing where some of your rookies who are going to come up is really important. It can win you a league, because what it will allow you to do is it will allow you to draft other positions earlier and wait on those positions until later in the draft, where you can then get your value with some of these picks. So, like looking at last year, some guys who had, not great years, but you could see signs of them coming out. Definitely, I'm a Mets fan, so definitely guys like Brandon Nimmo as an outfielder, a guy like Ahmed Rosario as a shortstop. Those are guys that I'm going to be targeting in the 10th through 12th, 13th rounds. And what that's going to do is that's going to allow me to wait on shortstop. So I'm not going to have to go out and get Carlos Correa. I'm not going to have to go out and get Francisco Lindor. I'm not going to go out and have to get, any of the big name top shortstops, because I can wait till the 10th round and I can draft Rosario. So now it allows me to go out and get someone a little bit earlier than I would. That will help me in scoring categories or help me in points leagues to get an advantage over other teams. So as I said in a couple of videos back, a lot of drafts, people wait on relievers because there's so many relievers out there and there's so many easy ways to get saves. You have a guy who can be a middle reliever who could get you 10 to 15 saves over a course of a year just because relievers can't pitch every day. So, again, to go back to the Mets, crutch, because I know the team so well, Edwin Diaz isn't going to pitch every day. So but no one's going to take Jervis Familia probably until all 30 firm number one closers have been taken. So now let's say you draft an Edwin Diaz. Now I can draft an Edwin Diaz in the 9th round and get a jump on the relief pitching market because I know I got some of these prospects and I know I have some of these sleepers in my mind for later on in the draft. So when everyone now is going and drafting a relief pitcher, I can double back and take an Ahmed Rosario, a Brandon Nimmo, or take a rookie like a Vlad Guerrero Jr. or a Peter Alonso or an Eloy Jimenez or a Fernando Tatis Jr. who's going to be a shortstop for the San Diego Padres who might get called up this year. He's the number 2 or 3 overall prospect in baseball. So knowing these guys can allow you to wait on a position. So like last year, if you knew Ronald Acuna, if you knew Juan Soto, if you knew some of these names from last year, it'll allow you to get a jump. So now what I can do is like I said, I can take an Edwin Diaz in the 8th round. So now when everyone else is drafting their first relief pitcher, I'm drafting my second. I'm going to have the advantage now in the saves category. Along with, if you get the right guy, it'll give you a bump in ERA, it'll give you a bump in WHIP, it can give you an ERA, a bump in strikeouts. It can do all that kind of thing. So that's really, really important. So everyone's always like, oh, prospects are just for dynasty leagues. Prospects are just for some keeper leagues and stuff like that. If you know the right ones, if you know your top 50 prospects, those are the ones that have a serious chance of getting called up this year. Unless they're so elevated of a prospect to where they just think so highly of them that they have them ranked, but they're not going to come in. A great tool to use is MLB.com, MajorLeagueBaseball.com. You go there and you can just do a Google search. You can just type in your search bar MLB top prospects. You can put 2019. It'll take you to the same place. You hit enter. Your screen will come up on Google and it'll show MLB Futures Watch or MLB Top Prospects or whatever for 2019. They don't have the full list up right now because they're actually updating the list for the 2019 season, but you'll see enough of the guys from 2018 that most of them are not in the major leagues yet. So when you go in, now you can sort this. You can sort this by position. You can sort it by team. You can do a lot of different stuff. So if you're looking for a certain position, you can look at like the top 10 overall catching prospects, the top 10 overall right-handed pitcher, the top 10 overall left-handed pitcher, second base, third base, shortstop, outfield, first base. Doesn't matter. You can go by position. That's a good way to do it because those are the guys that are the closest to being called up to the major leagues. Or you can look at the top 50 or 100 overall, or you can look at every team's top 30 prospects. And where this is important is it'll then list all the names. You can click on any of the pictures and it'll open up a window and it'll drop down. It'll give you information. The first thing you're going to see is at the top, it'll show what level they're at now. So single A, A advanced, double A, triple A, rookie ball, whatever it might be. It'll tell you the name of the team. It'll tell you their date of birth. It'll tell you when they were drafted, their height, their weight, their birth date. What it'll also do is there'll be a little thing in there. It'll say ETA or MLB ETA or something along that line. I don't have it in front of me, but I know it's right there. It'll have a year. That's when the experts at MLB.com are projecting that this player is going to reach the majors. So when you're looking through this list this year, any prospect that shows 2019, they're more than likely getting called up this year. Now, when they get called up is a completely different story. What you're going to have to do is you're going to have to look at the team's depth charts. you can read in the description. It'll kind of tell you what's going on. It'll say, you know, might be a late season call-up in 2019, which could be when the rosters expand in September, which makes them not so much of a good draft. You don't want to draft a guy who's only going to come up and get what we call a cup of coffee in 2019. You want the guys who are saying that they're going to make an impact in the lineup or an impact in the rotation in 2019. So then, if you scroll down, it'll show you last year's stats for, could be every level they played at. So if you had a guy who started the year at AA and finished the year in AAA, he might have got called up to the majors for 10 games. It'll show you. It'll say, you know, again, for the Mets, because I know the teams, it'll say AA Binghamton, AAA Las Vegas, MLB Mets. And then it'll go across and show you all the stats that they had. What I'm looking for in a prospect is extra base hits. So what I'm looking at is I'm looking at their number of at-bats, and then I'm adding up the number of doubles they had. It'll say 2B, which is doubles, 3B, which is triples, and HR, which is obviously home runs. I add up those numbers, and then I look at how many extra base hits in accordance and ratio to the number of at-bats that they had. If they have anywhere from 20 to 30% extra base hits, that's a good prospect. More than that, 30, 40% extra base hits, now you're looking at elite prospects. What I'm also looking at is their strikeout to walk ratio. If you look at their at-bats, let's say the guy has 500 at-bats. If he strikes out 125 times during the year, that means he's striking out 25% of the time. But now I want to look at how many walks he has. If he walks 75 times, well, now he only struck out 50 more times than he walked, and he had all those hits. That will be reflected when you scroll a little bit further over in his OBP, his on-base percentage. I want to see an on-base percentage of 350 or more. If they don't have an on-base percentage of 350 or more, I generally do not pay too much attention to them unless they have an elite skill. Offensive. I don't care about their defense, remember. So when you look at the rankings of all their, oh, I forgot to even say that, underneath their basic information where it says, you know, height, weight, date of birth, when they were drafted, it'll show their skill rankings. And these rankings go anywhere from 20 to 80. 20 meaning they're terrible. 80 meaning they're going to be Hall of Fame level at that thing. And normally what it is it's their hit skill, their power skill, their arm skill, their run skill for offense. And then there's one other. Hit, run, power, throw. I forget the other tool, but they're all there. And they're ranked from, like I said, from 20 to 80. You want to see at least 50. 50 means is that they're going to be at least average. Anything over 50, so 55 is good, 60 means they're above average, 70 to 80 means that they're elite. You very, very rarely see an 80. There's only a few people with a 70 tool right now, and some of those are the names that I've already mentioned. Vladimir Guerrero, Peter Alonso, Eloy Jimenez, stuff like that. They have a few 70 tools. Other than that, you don't see it. On the pitching, what they'll do is, and then they give an overall ranking. So what they think that overall, when you add up all these numbers and they combine everything, this is what we think the total of the player is going to be. Usually 50, 55, 60, 45, 40. If it's 40 or below, I generally don't even consider them in any league. You normally have to be at least a 50 for me to consider you in a league, whether it be Dynasty, Keeper, Redraft, anything. So for the pitching side, it'll list all their different pitches. So if they have a fastball, curveball, changeup, a slider, a screwball, whatever it might be, okay, any of those pitches, it'll show their ranking for that pitch. It'll show their control tool. And that's important because it's hard to teach control unless all of a sudden they change their mechanics, which makes them, a better pitcher. But a lot of times they don't do that. And then an overall. So for the hitters, again, going back to the hitters, if their on-base percentage is not over 350, I generally don't consider them unless they have an elite tool. And the two that I want to see, because if they're elite, if their hit tool was elite, their on-base percentage would be way over 350. Easily. Unless they never walk. But then they're going to be hitting 340 all the time, so then I'll still consider them. If they're power and they're stolen bases. Those are the two things I'm looking for. Home runs and stolen bases. If you have an OBP under 350, you better be hitting 30 home runs or stealing 30 bases. Otherwise, you're one-dimensional, and in fantasy, you're almost useless. And we'll get into that in a little bit. For pitching, there's really only two things I look at, because I don't look at opponent's average, I don't look at their ERA, I don't look at their whip, because in the minors, pitchers, it's weird, that's where they learn. You know, because in college and high school, before they're drafted, everyone throws a fastball and everyone throws a curveball. But it's when you hit the minor leagues that you really start learning how to pitch. It's when you develop a changeup. It's when you develop a slider. It's when you develop, you know, the out pitches, a split finger fastball, you know, a knuckle curve, you know, stuff like that. That's where you really start to work on those skills and those tools that will make you an elite major league pitcher, whether it's a starter or a reliever. The ones who wind up only getting 1 or 2 or 3 good pitches, they become your relievers most of the time, because they can come in, blow a couple of fastballs by you, get you out with a slider, and they can come in and save a game. It's the pitchers that have 4 or 5 pitches, those are the ones that become the starters. And then what makes them, you know, a top of the rotation starter or a bottom of the rotation starter is generally their makeup and their control and just their durability. And you can't really teach that a lot in the minors. But what you can do is teach them how to throw a changeup. So the reason why I don't look at ERA and whip and if they gave up a lot of home runs, if their opponent's average is really good, is because when you're learning how to throw a changeup, a lot of changeups are going to wind up going over the wall. Because if it doesn't do what it's supposed to do, it's basically a batting practice fastball. And if you're good enough to be in the minor leagues, you can hit a batting practice fastball and you can hit it a long way. So I don't look at that as much. What I look at is 2 things. 1, are you striking out more than a batter an inning? So if you had 100 innings pitched for the year, and what you can do is, again, when you click on the picture of the name, it'll pop up the whole thing. You go down to their stats. You bring the bar over to look at their innings pitched, their strikeouts, and their walks. It'll be signified by IP for innings pitched, K for strikeout, and BB for walk. It stands for base on balls. And what I do is I look at it, and if, just for the sake of round numbers, if they have 100 innings pitched, they need to have at least 90 to 95 strikeouts. I want to know that they're striking out about a batter an inning. Because if they're going to be a good starting pitcher, as they learn those 3rd and 4th pitches, those numbers are going to go up. They're going to be striking out 1.5 batters an inning. That's a dominant pitcher. If you're striking out 1.5 batters an inning, or once we start getting into more advanced terms, you're going to hear K per 9, which is the amount of strikeouts per 9 innings. So if they're striking out a batter and a half an inning, you're going to hear a 13.5 K per 9. That means they're striking out about a batter and a half an inning. That's Cy Young type stuff. That's Jacob deGrom. That's Clayton Kershaw. That's Justin Verlander. That's Corey Kluber. You know, that's Blake Snell. That's what those guys are doing on a consistent basis. They're striking out double digits every game. So that's what you want to see. What you also want to look at is how many strikeouts they have compared to walks. If they're striking out 100 batters, I don't want to see them walking more than 30. I want about a 3-to-1 strikeout to walk ratio. If I don't, then that honestly to me is more important than the Ks per inning. Because as they learn their secondary pitches, as they develop their secondary pitches, their K per 9 should go up. But if they have control issues, if they're walking the world, that's an issue for me. Because that means when they get to the major league level, they're going to be letting too many people on base, and good hitters will hit bad pitching. So Those are the things I'm looking for as prospects. So once you've targeted, as I said, I would say I generally go into a redraft league targeting 2 or 3 prospects or sleepers per position. And then what I do is I start drafting my studs at my positions that I know I want a stud at. So, I want at least 1 or 2 studs in the outfield. I want a stud at the power positions at first base and third base. I want one of the top catchers on the board, because once you get past maybe the top 5 to 8 catchers, the drop off is pretty severe. So you want your Yasmani Grandals, you want your Buster Posies, you want your Salvador Perez, your Wilson Contreras, you want your Wilson Ramos, your Yasmani Grandal, if I didn't say him already. But that's only about 6 or 7. And after that, now I'm starting to think, who do I really want other than that? So that's a position that I'm going to grab early. And again, now wait to grab an Ahmed Rosario to play short later on. A Brandon Nimmo to fill in my outfield. Or go to the prospect route and get a Vladimir Guerrero Jr. to play third base, or a Peter Alonso to play first base. Even if they're not called up right away, because as I talked about in my last interview, some of these guys aren't going to get called up until maybe May. I still am going to draft these prospects early because they're that big of a stud that they're going to give you great production even if they don't play the first month of the year. I can always grab someone like an Asdrubal Cabrera who has multiple positional eligibility. Later on in the draft, I can draft him in the 18th round. No one's going to draft him before then. Okay? And then I can plug him in at third base until Vladimir Guerrero comes up. And now I have Asdrubal Cabrera on my bench. So that's where you gotta think and know that, okay, these are the guys that are going to get called up in May. I may want to get them early, but then know in my head that I need to have a strong plan for in case they don't get called up until May. Or, God forbid, they get hurt in the minors while they're waiting to get called up and they don't get called up till June or July. I want to have someone strong in mind that I can draft later on in the draft to hold that spot until. And that's really important in redraft leagues. Not so much in keeper leagues and in dynasty leagues, because in those leagues you're playing more long-term. You're playing more multi-year. So if someone has a bad year, oh well. Or if someone doesn't get called up right away, oh well. You're going to have them later on. So it's not as big of a deal. So that's pretty much that for redraft leagues. Now we're going to talk about auction leagues in general, because you don't see typically a lot of dynasty leagues as auction leagues. You see them more in the redraft and in the keeper leagues. And auction drafts are fun because there's a lot of strategy involved. And you have to have a budget. As I talked about in my first video, when I talked about the types of leagues and the types of drafts, generally in auction leagues, you'll have about like $260, $280. And that's how much you have to spend for your entire team. So what's going to happen is you have to know that, okay, we're drafting, let's say you're drafting 20 players. Okay, so a catcher, a first base, a second base, a third base, a shortstop, 3 outfielders, a utility. That's already 9. So maybe then 7 pitchers, 6 pitchers, and a 4 or 5 man bench. So you're probably drafting more than 20, because I think the league is going to be deeper than that. So let's say you're drafting like 23, 24 players. You only have $260, $280 to spend. So that's an average of like $12, $13 a player. So now what happens? The first name that's going to go up on the board is Mike Trout. So you all of a sudden see the bidding go up to $30, $40, $50, and you're like, oh my God, I'm going to spend 20% of my money for my entire team on one player. Well, welcome to baseball. That's what happens. Teams have a budget, and they have to know, are we going to spend? That's what's going on. That's why people aren't signing Bryce Harper and Manny Machado right now, because they're like, do I really want to spend $300 million over 10 years and 20-30% of my team's payroll is going to be tied up into one player? So You have to have a plan. This is, again, where knowing your sleepers and knowing your prospects are very important. Because what's going to happen is later in the draft, when no one has any money to spend, and you go, okay, great, I'm going to bid $1 on Peter Alonso, and no one can match it. Or, you have $10 left and everyone only has $2 left, so you can be like, all right, Peter Alonso for $3. Well, now guess what? Now that allows you the extra money to go out and spend a $50, a $45 on Mike Trout, on a Mookie Betts, on a Christian Yelich, on the Nolan Arenados, all these studs that are out there, they're going to get you the stats that you need to win these leagues. You can do that if you know some of these, like a Jeurys Familia, again, who's not going to get a lot of draft play, who's not going to get a lot of money play because he's not the closer, but is still going to probably wind up with 15, 20 saves at the end of the year because he's going to fill in for Edwin Diaz, or if Edwin Diaz gets hurt and he has to fill in for a longer stretch of time. So you'll be able to pick up a Jeurys Familia later in the draft for $2, $3 in an auction draft, because he's considered a middle reliever, especially if that draft doesn't reward any kind of points or stats for holds. If it's just saves only, you could probably get Jeurys Familia for $1 or $2. So that's where, knowing like a good 10, 15 guys that you'll be able to get for $1 or $2 is going to allow you the flexibility to say, I'm going to spend $50 on Mike Trout. So now how an auction works is someone will nominate a player, and then they'll go up for bid, and everyone can just start bidding like crazy, and there'll be a countdown timer, and once the timer hits 0, if no one puts a bid in, whoever has the highest bid at that point wins the player. So part of the strategy is, when it comes around for me to nominate a player, I don't nominate a player that I want. I nominate a player that people are going to spend their money on. Case in point, Giancarlo Stanton of the New York Yankees. He gets hurt quite a bit. He's only had 2 healthy seasons in his life. He's a big power threat, which is also going to give him RBIs, but he's not a very big average or on-base percentage threat. He doesn't steal any bases, so he's not a 5-tool player when it comes to fantasy baseball. So I'll throw him out there, and then I'll immediately put a bid of $25. So now all these guys that are home run hungry, they're like, oh, I just want guys who are going to hit home runs. They're going to start running up the price. Or they're going to say, no, I don't want to run up the price on Giancarlo Stanton, and the timer is going to run down, and you might get him for $25, which for the production he's going to give you is a great price to have Giancarlo Stanton. But what you want to have happen is, you want a bidding war to start, and you want Giancarlo Stanton to go for $35 or $40, because now those people just spent that kind of money on Giancarlo Stanton, and that's less money they can spend on a Mike Trout, on a Mookie Betts, on a Christian Yelich, on a JD Martinez, guys who are 5-tool players in fantasy. That's what you want. You want someone who's going to check off all the boxes. You want someone who's going to be power, hit, average, stolen bases, and then whatever your 5th category might be, whether it's on base percentage, total bases, runs scored, whatever it might be. If you do 6 categories, it'll probably be 2 of those categories that I just mentioned. So that's what you want. You want to throw guys out there who are good players, who people would want, but that you don't want. So that way they spend their money. And then you sit back and wait for someone else to nominate a player that you do want, and that's where you spend your money. Until later in the draft, and then that's when you start adding in your sleepers. Me, I'll throw in a sleeper in the middle of a draft. I'll just be, I'll throw Peter Alonso for $2 out there. And everyone's going to be like, oh my God, he's much more valuable. If I had the first pick if I had the first nomination in an auction draft this year, I'd do Vladimir Guerrero at $5. And guess what? If he goes to $15, great. That's $15 that person doesn't have to spend, and it's 1 third baseman off the board, because people aren't allowed to bid on a roster spot that they already have. Once their roster's full, so if you see that Vladimir Guerrero hasn't been nominated yet, but everybody else has their third baseman and has their bench filled, okay, then guess what? Don't nominate him. You don't have to bid against anybody to get him. He's going to be on your team. Wait till the end. Let him be your last pick. and throw them out there for $1. Now, guess what? That's more money you can spend everywhere else. So, that's how. Pardon me a second. I gotta grab a drink. So, that's where you want to be. Okay? That's strategy for auction leagues. I'm going to kind of handle Keeper and Dynasty together because they're kind of the same thing. It's just in Keeper, you have less players that you keep every year. In Dynasty, you keep everybody. In Dynasty, you got to be cold. You have to look at your players as assets because that's all they are. They are a means to an end. They are there to get you stats. They are there to win you money. Now, I play leagues that, let's just use this one league for example. I play in a league, and it's a Dynasty league. I actually am a founding member of the league. And I've been playing it for almost 10, 12 years. And we pay $60 a year. And first place pays $400. So I only have to win once every 7 years for me to break even. So what that allows me to do is that allows me the flexibility of, if my team's not doing well, I'll blow it up and start over. As long as they can be contenders within 3 or 4 years again, I have a great chance of at least breaking even, if not going on a run of 2 or 3 years where I make the playoffs in cash, and I can make money on the league in the long term. And that's where your focus should be. Not to win 1 year, but to win long term. To set up a league where you can have a dynasty. That's why they call it a dynasty league. So I took over a team in another league that had players, and right now the team's terrible. But I have something around 12 or 13 of the top 100 prospects in baseball on that team. So in another 2 years, I'm going to be one of the dominant teams in that league, because you have to figure the teams that have been winning are the teams that right now have Justin Verlander, Clayton Kershaw, Buster Posey, guys who only have another 2 or 3 years left. And now what's going to happen is they, this year, need to be looking at drafting the replacements for those guys. But because these leagues are so deep, we start 24 guys, we have a 10-man bench, and we have an 18-man minor system. So when we're drafting our rookies, we're drafting the guys that were actually drafted in the rookie draft last year in June or July, whenever they hold the first-year entry draft, and any international signings. So, last year, Shohei Ohtani was available in our draft, because if they signed during the year, you're not allowed to draft them until the following year, if they sign after our draft. So, this year, the big free agent signing from overseas is the pitcher that's going to be with, he signed with the Angels, I think, Kikuchi. He signed with Seattle. He's going to be the big international guy this year. I personally don't think he's going to be all that good. He's a relief pitcher. He's listed as a relief pitcher. I don't know if they're going to let him start, but I'm not a huge believer in him. I personally think the number 1 draft pick for rookies this year, if you're drafting just from the rookie draft, should be Joey Bart, the catcher for the San Francisco Giants. But that's besides the point right now. But if you are starting a dynasty, let's say you're drafting a league from scratch right now. First of all, it's a huge commitment. You're drafting, based on what I just told you, 54 players. My league has 16 teams. So you are drafting over 900 players. Okay? So if you were only using Major League Baseball as your example, you'd basically be drafting every player in the major leagues and still not filling your roster. You're drafting a lot of minor league players. You have to do a lot of research. You have to do a lot of studying, a lot of pouring through these prospect lists and stuff like that to see who is doing well, who is going to do well in 2 or 3 years. And my goal when I start a Dynasty League, I started a new one last year. Actually, a couple friends were interested in doing a Dynasty League, so I was like, all right, come on, let's put one together. Actually, they were talking about it, and a friend brought me into it because of my level of expertise with fantasy dynasty leagues, and was like, hey, what should we do here, stuff like that. And I gave some advice, and we were doing it. We wound up doing points, which I'm not a huge fan of. I'd rather category leagues for dynasty, but it's been fun. But my goal going into that draft was to draft nobody over the age of 27 years old. And I did a pretty good job. I'd say about 90% of my team is under 27. What it means is I came in dead last in the league last year. But that's okay. Because, again, I have a lot of top prospects. I have a lot of top pitching prospects and a lot of top position player prospects. So, again, in about a year or two, I'm going to be a force to be reckoned with in that league. And that's all that it takes, because now if I go on a 3-year run, let's say in my one league that I was talking about before, okay, it's $60 a year to play in the league. So let's say and it's $400 for first place. So let's say I go on a 3-year run of winning that league. I now have paid for that league for 20 years. Because 60 times 20 is $1,200. I just paid for that league for 20 years. So, and that's great. That's all you can ask for. When you're gambling, when you're doing any kind of, if you're having fun with it, if you break even, that's a win because you're enjoying yourself. If you make money, then that's great too. But in my mind, as long as I break even and I get to have fun and I get to do this kind of thing, because who out there doesn't say, man, if I ran the Mets, I could do it so much better. Well, here you go, hotshot. Here's your chance to prove it. Play a dynasty league. Run a team. And what's great about it is with most dynasty leagues, you don't even have to worry about contracts and free agents and stuff like that. All you have to do is make trades and draft well. And you can always make good trades because there are always going to be teams that are rebuilding. There are always going to be teams that are trying to win now. So that's how in the one league that I took over, that I blew up, and I have like 12 or 13 players that are in the top 100, I had like 4 or 5 decent players on that team. I just waited until like the trading deadline before the playoffs, and I said, okay, I'm selling all 5 of these players. I know in advance I'm going to suck. But I'm going to sell these 5 players for good, solid, huge prospects. So now that's how I acquired like 8 or 9 of these top 10 prospects. And now I've had the number 1 pick in the draft for the past 3 years, and I've drafted studs every year. I'm about to get another one, this kid Joey Bart that we talked about from San Francisco Giants. He's the heir apparent to Buster Posey. He'll probably be the starting catcher in San Francisco within the next 2 years, maybe 3 at the latest. He's on my roster. Also on that roster, I have Vladimir Guerrero, Eloy Jimenez, and Peter Alonso. 3 names that I've mentioned constantly in these videos. Matter of fact, when I did that one video about the drafts where I showed you guys my roster and I showed you guys that I have all 3 of those guys on my roster, that's the league I'm talking about. That's the league where I took over a team and I just blew it up, and I'm playing all prospects and I'm playing all rookies, and I'm going to suck, and I know that, and it's fine. I'm great with it. I'm having a blast. I'm having more fun in that league than I am in the leagues that I'm actually making the playoffs every year and doing well in. Because I like building a team from the ground up. I like blowing it up and starting it over from scratch. That's fun. I also like the fact that during the year, you can add players whenever you want. So I like looking at like MILB.com. That's the minor league baseball website. It's affiliated with Major League Baseball, but it's a separate website altogether. And what they'll do every week is they name minor league players of the week in every league in the minor leagues. So what I'll do is I'll start looking at them and I'll be like, oh, okay, look, this guy's won player of the week 4 times in the first 7 weeks. Oh, look, he's not listed in the top 30 prospects yet for that team. Great. That just means he's a stud in waiting and he hasn't been recognized yet. I add him to my team now. Because guess what? I'm going to get the jump on all these guys in my league who are doing the exact same thing I'm doing. And there's nothing more satisfying than when I add one of these guys and I get 5 emails that are like, oh, you son of a bitch, I was going to add him next week. That is the most satisfying feeling ever in fantasy baseball, is when you add somebody and you get people cursing you out for it. That is like, yes. So that's really, that's the biggest reason why I think Dynasty is the best way to play. It is so much fun. It has made me such a better fan. When I'm watching a game, I can be zoning out and just, I'll be on Facebook, but I'll be like, listening to the game and kind of watching it. But all of a sudden I'll hear, oh, and at the top of the next inning, we're going to have a prospect report for some of our guys in the minor leagues. And I'll be like, let's go. I grab my phone and I put it on notes mode, and I like start writing the names down of all the guys they're talking about. And then I go look and see if they're owned by anyone in our league, and then I go check their stats, and if they're not owned, I add them. And then invariably, again, I'll get a couple of messages or emails. I'm like, damn you. And it's, like I said, it's great. There's nothing like it. So that's why I love Dynasty Leagues. I feel everyone should at some point play Dynasty. I really feel, but once you start playing Dynasty, Redraft really doesn't hold too much appeal for me anymore. I'll play it every once in a while, if like some friends want to throw together a league or something like that. I'll be like, yeah, I'll play, for like $20-$30 or something like that. I'll be okay. The only way I'd really get serious about a redraft league is if I had the cash, flow and the bankroll to start playing some of the leagues where it's like, $200 a man, and it's like 16 teams, so it's $3,200 prize pool, and it's like $1,500 for first place, $1,600 for first place. Then I would really get into it and take it seriously. But at the same point, then a lot of my tactics and stuff like that, I'd have to really refine them, because everyone in that league would know what I know, and they would all be doing the same things I would be doing. So it would be a fun league to do because of that, because I would really like to play a league with like 12 to 16 guys who know fantasy the way I know fantasy, and would be able to basically, I'd really like to see where my skill level was at. But with a 7-year-old and with a baby on the way, and I'm already working 2 jobs, I really can't afford to do like $200 fantasy leagues and stuff like that. So I'll stick with my $30 leagues, my $60 leagues, and I'll just make some money doing that. But yeah, so that pretty much is that. That's like kind of like some draft strategies that, can be used by some beginners, but also some advanced players. For the keeper leagues, pretty much everything I said in Dynasty. If you're starting a new league and you're a keeper league, depending on how many keepers you have, if you're keeping anywhere from 5 to 10 players on your team, then you want to make sure a good half of your team is good, solid players under the age of 26, 27. Because you're going to want to, that's going to be your base of guys that you're going to keep on a year-to-year basis. If it's an auction league, generally, you can only keep the guys that you keep for like 3 years, and then they go back into the keeper pool. So you want to make sure that if you're spending a lot of money on those guys, that they're going to be good for at least 3 years. You don't want to be spending that kind of money on a guy who's 35 years old, just because you're going to be stuck keeping him possibly for those 3 years at that price. Because remember, if it's a keeper auction league, you have that 260 or 280, but the people you keep get taken off of your budget. So if you keep Mike Trout and he was $50 and you start with a $260 budget, then that means next year you start with $210 if Mike Trout's the only person you keep. So that really influences how you draft, and that's going to influence how many rookies and how many sleepers you need to know for the following year, because to keep Mike Trout, you're going to need some extreme value to be able to hold on to guys like that. So, so again, that's where, sleepers and rookies and prospects and stuff are not just for dynasty leagues. They're for redraft leagues. They're for keeper leagues. You need to know these players. And that's where the next videos are going to really start getting involved with that, because I'm going to start breaking down the teams. I still haven't decided yet whether I'm going to do it team by team or division by division. I'm going to do some work on it over the next couple of days and see just how deep and how many players for each team are completely fantasy relevant. The studs I'm going to gloss over. Like when I talk about the Angels, I'm not going to be talking about, Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani. Those are guys that are plug-and-play guys. Every format, it doesn't matter. I might throw out a price value for you to be targeting if you're going to be looking to draft them in an auction league. But I'm not going to spend a lot of time on those players, because obviously you should know, if you're going to play fantasy, you should know who they are and you should know that they're good. I'm going to spend a lot more time on the mid-tier lower tier, and the rookies and prospects. So I'm going to really kind of take a look at how many players for each team that's going to entail. And if it's only 5 or 6 players for each team, then I might try and knock it out a division at a time. That way, I'm going to open it up for you guys to start, hopefully maybe asking me some questions. If you have decisions between, I got to decide for my last keeper spot between this guy and that guy. Or, someone offered me this trade, what should I do? Stuff like that. And then I'll start doing some videos based on that. So if I can knock it out by division, I will, but I don't want to be doing a 2-hour video on each division either. I want to try and keep these videos anywhere in between a half hour to an hour. That's what I've been aiming for, because I just think anything longer than that, I might lose some of you. I'll probably lose some of you anyway, even with some of these hour-long videos. But yeah, so I'm going to either do it by division or by team. I have a funny feeling that I'm going to wind up having to do it by team. Which is good because, I can get a little bit more in depth on the players. I don't have to be like, okay, this guy, that guy, that guy, that guy, that guy, let's move on. But if I do that, please feel free to ask me questions about specific players. Please feel free to ask me questions about trades and decisions and stuff like that you guys might have. Please comment below with the questions. I'm going to be coming up with that email pretty soon for this page, so that way you guys can just send me emails when you guys have a question, so that I can start doing some of the Q&A videos. Like, subscribe, share, do all that kind of good stuff for me, and we'll talk to you guys in a couple of days.